Welcome to our study of Journey Without Goal, the Tantric Wisdom of the Buddha. And I apologize, we had to skip last week's session. I was traveling, so couldn't do that. Anyway, very glad to be back here with you all. And we're actually approaching the conclusion of the book. We're looking at Anuttara Tantra today and possibly next time. Let's see how many times. And then we'll conclude with Mahāti, great perfection. And following that, then I'm going to be going through a work by His Holiness the Dalai Lama on the sort of a summary of the Bodhicharya Avatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, which is so essential really to what we're doing with the Vajrayana. It's the foundation of that vast mind of courageousness that really is an indispensable foundation for us even thinking of embracing the view and practice of Vajrayana. And just this morning, actually, I was attending this conference, some scholars' conference around the existing array, actually, of works that celebrate the way of the Bodhisattva. This was Douglas Duckworth, Woolston Fletcher, Jose Cabezon, Jonathan Gold, and so forth, people associated with Sadra. And it's quite extraordinary what we have already now in English in terms of translations and also translations of commentaries. Commentaries on the general 8 chapters, but also on the 9th wisdom chapter. I say this because this informs so much of what we're doing. So, well, not exactly that, but quoting the Vijayadhara, where famously said, don't forget the Hinayana, we also shouldn't forget the Mahayana. And we would want to very much approach what we're doing here in terms of experience. And that's where we need to, quoting someone else, start where we are. And that's where all the foundational aspects of the path really need to be in place. And I also say this a little bit as a precursor to today's discussion, and obviously also the next chapter on Anuttara Tantra and Mahāti, which very much are founded on pith instructions, and no, not just pith instructions, actually more than that, the Tantras, statements and pith instructions, as well as also a vast array of just general knowledge of, you could say, the ontological and epistemological aspects of the path as it applies in the Vajrayana. And that's where there will be sections in today's chapter where I'm going to just let the Vijayadhara speak for himself and try to be a little bit cautious of not volunteering too much of my own reflections in this context, because at the end of the day, we're touching on some very delicate, very profound aspects of the path. And I'd like to make a disclaimer that I do not consider myself qualified to speak about these higher levels of Tantra. At the same time, I would also very much encourage everyone and all of us here to make connection with it and to pursue the path. But the path of Tantra is so vast that there are sections of it, and Rinpoche here refers to the Kalachakra Tantra, that is very difficult to gain a thorough knowledge. And I have to say, Kalachakra Tantra is not something that I'm an expert on. There's a few themes that are being touched upon in the context of this chapter that I'll make a few sort of little tentative comments on. But other than that, I would say please consult other works by the Vijayadhara, such as the Ocean of Profound Instructions, the Ocean of Profound Dharma, and as much as you can, the Vajrayana transcripts, as well as also the commentarial and pith instruction literature that we have in translation. Anyway, what we're doing is very good, very worthwhile, very important. So I'm very glad that you're here. And keep in mind that we're doing this very much with an awareness of how much suffering there is in the world, and really intending to get to the bottom of it. We can do a lot of patchwork in terms of temporary solutions founded on the politics and so forth, and of course we should do that. But at the end of the day, all the issues and all the suffering that we find in the world, if we analyze, comes back to afflicted subjectivities, either in groups or in individuals. And that's where it's so important that we continually come back to being completely aware of what our motivation is, and making sure that our motivation is not tainted with toxic attitudes that project self and other and so forth, and particularly that is embraced by this attitude of bodhicitta, that really wishes to put up with all sentient beings as they are, and also in terms of what their potential is. So that's where we approach this very much as a part of our journey in terms of our path. So this study, then we embrace this, or we approach this, sorry, with this attitude of bodhicitta. Going to start with the section at the beginning of Journey Without Goal, which is the translation of Crying to the Gurus from Afar. And having reflected on our situation and the foundational aspects, yeah, actually also something else I'd like to highlight on the just as along the lines of what I was saying before. Please visit the Chronicles pages, the Chronicles, in which you have the live teachings actually of the Vajrayana himself speaking what we're looking at here. So that will carry a lot of value. That we can learn so much just from connecting with the person rather than just the words. So to have actually all this footage is just such an incredible treasure. So please go to the Chronicles, and what we're looking at here can be found in as spoken by the Vajrayana himself. Anyway, then coming back to the Crying to the Gurus from Afar, we start off with the reflection, having invoked all the teachers of what we call the 8 practice lineages. We then actually voice our own aspiration on the path, which is a very honest and insightful exposure of recognition of our situation, and also what we'll look at now, exposure of our challenges. So the recognition lies in realizing the preciousness of the human rebirth, its impermanence, the situation of being caught in the delusion of samsara, and the situation of, as long as we are there, whatever we do with our body, speech, and mind has actually impact. What we do matters. So that's where that we understand the value of the path. But then, in terms of the path, this has to be done with a complete candor and openness, and that's where it's very much part of the culture in Buddhism to be very open and honest about our shortcomings. We don't just kind of like pretend everything's fine. We don't fake it till we make it, but we're very much about exposure, exactly who we are, what we're dealing with. And that's where, for the time being, humbly acknowledging that we are confused individuals, that's very much part of our homework. So as much as we acknowledge Buddha nature, as much as we might be sadhakas who practice seeing ourselves in terms of our true underlying nature through sadhana and Vajrayana practice, or we're bodhisattvas having taken the vow, then we also very much operate with a clear recognition of our shortcomings. The more we can expose our shortcomings, the weaker they actually have. It's a bit like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings, you know. The more we bring it out in the light, the weaker it is. The more we kind of just, oh yeah, well, I have that, but I have good sides too. No need to talk about the negative parts. But the thing is, when we talk about the negative parts, they are not allowed to fester. They come out in the open, and the more they're out in the open, the less their value, or rather, the less that weakens their strength, and the less, you could say, they can insist on their value. So we do that very much as part of our sadhana, very much as part of our path. So Jamgon Kongtrul here, he says, my faults are as large as a mountain, but I conceal them within me. Others' faults are as minute as a sesame seeds, but I proclaim and condemn them. I boast about my virtues, though I don't even have a few. I call myself a Dharma practitioner and practice only non-Dharma. Guru, think of me. Look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessing so that I subdue my selfishness and pride. So nobody's talking about anybody being a bad person, innately bad, but we're talking about us being confused and being caught in a rather unconstructive cycle that centers on ourselves, and that even makes a sort of a project out of saying, oh, when I was in this situation, I did this. Ain't I interesting? Or I'm a Dharma person, and I sort of take my mala and I sort of wear it around my neck, sort of as some sort of like hat or something like that. Or we sort of do things that make it clear to everyone that we belong to this particular club. And so we're very quick to actually identify the shortcomings of others. This person is like this. I can't stand this person. Or this person is corrupt. This person can't be trusted. The thing is, what happens to others is really their business. At the end of the day, it's very much about us actually just being honest about our shortcomings. And we needn't make a big fuss about it. We needn't whine about it, even though sometimes there's actually something delightful. I have some friends that are just so funny in exposing their neurosis. It can become a little bit of a trip, but at the same time, it is delightful when it really comes from the heart and we make fun of ourselves. So that's where the words of Jamgon Kongtrul, they probably, most of us will sort of say, that kind of rings true, actually, certainly for myself. There's another place actually where Jamgon Kongtrul says, we're very quick to see the louse in someone else's hair, but we fail to see that there's a yak sitting on our own nose. So we kind of have that sort of very clear perception of the faults in others, and somehow we're kind of rather myopic with regards to our own shortcomings. Anyway, this is very much part of the culture that we belong to, very much part of the lineage culture, if you like. And it very much prompts a very real journey. Okay. Let's see. Anyway, yes. Okay, let's go to the chapter on Anuttara Tantra. And like I said, we probably will finish the chapters before we finish this section. So what we'll do then is just go back and go over this, the Crying to the Gurus, until we complete it. It's rather delightful reading. Okay, Anuttara Yoga. So there's a little bit difference here between what we call the new translations and old translations. In the old translations, we actually have also what we have in the new translation, something we call Mother Tantra, Father Tantra, Mother Tantra, non-dual Tantra, but we refer to these as Maha, Anu, and Ati. Trungpa Rinpoche, he is referring to Anuttara Yoga Tantra and Father, Mother, non-dual Tantra in the context of the outer Tantras, and really as, you could say, the culmination of the outer Tantras. And that is possibly valid. I think to some extent in Tibetan Buddhism, there was a little bit of sense that you'd wanted to do the politically correct thing and say that the inner tantras, as we have it in the Nyingma tradition, the Anuttara Tantra Yoga there, with its Maha, Anu, and Ati, also referred to as Father, Mother, and non-dual Tantra, was on par with the highest Tantras in the new translations. And that, for all purposes, of course, makes sense in terms of the emphasis. But the view is slightly different, and I'm not going to go into that here. But I do remember Trungpa Rinpoche is rather of the opinion that the inner Tantras in the Nyingma tradition do extend somewhat beyond the Tantras in the outer highest Tantra in the new translation. I remember once in one transcript, Rinpoche was talking about how we can talk about this as the highest Tantra. But that's a bit like saying, and this was in the 1970s, we're standing on the top of the Empire State Building, and we're kind of ignoring the fact that there's helicopters and planes still sort of moving above us, even higher yet. So we could say I'm on the highest point of New York City back in the 70s, right? Or early 70s, I guess. Anyway, so there is some difference there, but in general, we would just say Anuttara Yoga Tantra covers then the highest Tantra. But yes, so the Trungpa Rinpoche here says, the first three Tantric yanas, Kriya Yoga Yana, Upa Yoga Yana, and Yoga Yana, are called lower Tantra. And the last three Tantric yanas, Mahayoga Yana, Anuyoga Yana, and Ati Yoga Yana, are called higher Tantra. Anuttara Yoga brings together the teachings of the lower Tantra. It is usually not regarded as a separate yana, but as the culmination of the first three. In some way, it acts as a bridge between the lower Tantra and the higher Tantra. So what I've said before more is to inform you in case you're looking at the classical works, but for the time being, let's just stick entirely with what Trungpa Rinpoche is saying. And he says the word Anuttara, in Tibetan lame or lame, literally means nothing higher. As far as the lower Tantras are concerned, Anuttara is the highest Tantric achievement. Many Tantric practices, such as Kala Chakra, Chakra Sambhara, and Guhya Samaj, are based on Anuttara Yoga. Earlier, we discussed the principles of body, speech, and mind. It is through body, speech, and mind that we relate with the phenomenal world. Such a relationship is not necessarily spiritual. It is physical, bodily. It is a question of being a person of sanity, a person of openness. In fact, we could approach the whole path in a secular way and call it the non-theistic discipline of developing sanity and openness, rather than regarding it as purely a religious tradition. So this is where the Vajrayana excels, because of course, the culmination of the Mahayana, which is enlightenment, in terms of its teaching, teaches the Prajna Paramita, the Madhyamika, the nirvana of non-abiding, or the middle way of non-abiding, which is freedom from any conceptual reference point, shunyata, and so forth. So there's no question that there's no higher perspective in terms of, you could say, the objective reality. Where Vajrayana excels, and also to some degree we could say the view is even higher, is the way that it relates to the phenomenal world. And that very much brings in the experience of the subject, the one that engages this dimension of truth, of sanity, of openness. And so while the Mahayana, it expounds, as we have it in works like the Heart Sutra and the Prajna Paramita literature, the Madhyamika, and so on, while it exposes the complete absence of any reference point, any solid, confused projection, which is then the teaching on shunyata, while it introduces us to this open dimension, and this is huge and very important, then the way that we engage with it in the Vajrayana is far more profound because of the way that it constitutes the one who is engaging with that experience of openness. And that's why we would say, from the point of view of the object, it's the same. From the point of view of the subject, the Vajrayana is particularly profound, and that's where we then engage with our actual immediate experience of body, speech, and mind. And this is in no way anything, or rather it actually moves beyond the theism that lies when the objective approach of enlightenment, emptiness, and so forth is somewhat an unknown. Whereas here, with the engagement with the teacher, with all we've covered now in terms of the actual experience, we are actually identifying how this nature, this Buddha nature, abides within. And so they could say this is the ultimate doing away of theism. It's the ultimate doing away of conceptual constructs. So that's why Vajrayana, as Trungpa Rinpoche says elsewhere, he says it is really where we actually finally go beyond theism. And that is where we then engage with something that is very immediate. And so that's where Trungpa Rinpoche here talks about the body, speech, and mind as being engaged. And this is, yes, we could say it's a secular path. It's, say, a phenomenology of awakening, and certainly is not founded on any kind of assumptions or beliefs or wishful thinking about something greater. It's very much about engaging with what we are right now. So in the previous chapter, we've talked a lot about establishing the insight of pure perception, the mandala principle, Vajra nature, and so forth. And in that way, there's an understanding of the innate purity that that permeates ourselves and the phenomenal world. Here we're going to go on to looking at how this actually is employed in terms of the level of energy. And this is where we then speak about energy in terms of that intangible quality that drives us. And this is associated with the speech. So Trungpa Rinpoche here says, in Anuttara Yoga, there is particular emphasis on speech. Speech is not only voice or verbal description, but any speech-like experience that brings a sense of rhythm or movement. In other words, it is energy or circulation rather than sound alone. We're not using speech here in the narrow sense, but we're speaking of speech-like situations, an interchange that exists related with hearing, seeing, smelling, and the general sensory system of the body. As the basic communication that takes place in human society, speech is not limited to newspapers, television, and radio shows. More basically, it is a link between us and our body, a link between us and our mind. As such, speech brings mind to the cognitive level and body to the energetic level. Such a link, either with the mind or with the body, takes place constantly. This kind of movement and energy is speech. So this is also where we, at this point, we relate with all the levels of our perceptions, and that's where the Vajrayana engages all our various aspects of our body, our speech, and so forth. That's why there's so much emphasis on, you could say, what looks to be ritual, but really is just a yoga that engages aspects of our phenomenal experience in terms of tasting, touching, movement, and so forth. More than, or alongside, of course, the cognitive aspect of the mind. But it is, it's on the basis of this engagement with the phenomenal world that the Vajrayana then engages the fullness of our experience. Trungpa Rinpoche continues, some kind of interchange takes place in our life constantly, which is known as energy. We're not talking about energy as a gigantic womb that suddenly zaps us and makes us feel electrified. That kind of expectation seems to be a spiritual version of playing cowboys and Indians. When a local bandit swings open the bar door and walks in, suddenly tension builds up. There is obviously the possibility of a gunfight. We're not talking about energy at that level, even spiritually. Energy here is the self-existing energy that exists in every one of us. It's not particularly a sensation of electrified vibrations of energy. Such a sensation is very rare, if it happens at all. It could happen when we're at the height of our temper, but that is just one of those things that we do when we feel weak. When we don't feel so good, we might lose our temper to try to recharge ourselves. But energy is not necessarily so pathetic. Rather, there is self-existing energy that goes on constantly. Purely at the survival level, we exist others exist, and therefore energy takes place constantly. There is energy of aggression, energy of passion, energy of depression, energy of excitement, energy of uncertainty, and so on. So here we're talking about not extraordinary energy, but very immediate, ordinary, everyday, domestic, what have you, energy. This that takes place all the time. What am I going to do next? It's 9:25, and at 11 o'clock I have to do this. At 2 o'clock I have to do that, etc. We have this sort of engagement with our world that constantly involves attachment, aversion, excitement, worry, and so on. So there's all the time energy that's taking place in terms of our immediate experience. So Trungpa says, according to the tantric tradition, beginning with Upayoga, Yogayana, and Anuttara Yoga, such energy is divided into 3 parts. The Anuttara Yoga model that we're going to discuss is based on Kala Chakra Tantra. Kala means time and chakra is wheel. So Kala Chakra means the wheel of time. Tantra in this context is used to designate a root text of Vajrayana teaching. This Tantra, as well as many others, describes 3 types of energy: Nadi, Prana, and Bindu. So just a note on Tantra. Vajrayana very much operates on the basis of the scriptures, which are called Tantras, then what we call statements, which are you could say, expositions of great Vijayadharas and great Bodhisattvas on the meaning of the Tantras, and these can be quite extensive. And then we have the Upadesha, which can be pith instructions and also sadhana practice, which is a way to actually engage the teaching of the Tantra itself and also the meaning that's expounded in the statements. So we have these 3 categories that we call, in Tibetan, Gyu Lung Mengak, and in Sanskrit we call it Tantra, Agrama, and Upadesha. So these are then translated as Tantra as the scripture, then Agrama or Lung as statements, and the pith instructions, then Upadesha as the Mengak as the pith instructions. But these then constitute precise instructions or also sadhana. So this is where the vision that we then have of a particular Tantra is then integrated by such means. Now, the Kala Chakra Tantra is a big deal, as many of you will know. And this is when His Holiness Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama actually is famous as the Dalai Lama that has given the Kala Chakra empowerment the most times. I can't remember, it's like 30 times or something. It's a big deal. It takes a week. It's enormous. There are also other ways in which the Kala Chakra are conferred, with shorter ways. And if you read Born in Tibet, the Vijayadhara describes how he went to see Tsongsa Khyentse Chögyam. And actually, it's a very, very wonderful little, just a paragraph that describes his great awe of Tsongsa Khyentse Chögyam. And also that Tsongsa Khyentse Chögyam bestowed upon him the Kala Chakra empowerment while they were there. Anyway, this is a very important Tantra, and it is really belongs to the category that we call non-dual within the Anuttara Yoga Yana. So here then, on the basis of that, we're going to discuss Nadi, Prana, and Bindu. And roughly speaking, Nadi refers to the bodily aspects of the channels or meridians, but particularly within the context of Indian and Buddhist Vajrayana, Indo-Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana, we talk about the body actually having this whole web of essentially channels, meridians, if you like, energy channels, and we would say there's something like 72,000 throughout the body. They are essentially associated with the 3 main nadis, which is the central nadi, and then the lalana and the Chögyam and Roma, which is in Sanskrit lalana and rasa. Yeah, lalana, lalana and rasana, and then we have the avaduti, uma, and then roma and kyangma. So these are then nadis that run in the center of the body and to the right and left. And then these, again, they're associated with particular chakras. So there's a whole, you could say, science around the subtle body in terms of how the energy pulses within the physical body. Now, what's interesting about the Kala Chakra is that it doesn't just think of yoga in terms of the physical body, but also sees it very much in terms of the outer universe. So the Kala Chakra describes the laws of the body, but also the laws of the universe. And this is also on the basis of Kala Chakra that we have teachings on astrology and so forth. So there's very much, you could say, a unity between the outer and the inner, the macrocosm and the microcosm, the outer body, the inner body, and then also, of course, the mind. And so it talks about outer, inner, and other in the Kala Chakra teachings. So when we're discussing nadi, we're talking about a physical aspect, and the Vajrayana will elaborate about how we can relate to that. And then prana is then the chi, or the energy that runs on that, and bindu is then that which actually is carried on the prana, and this is associated with consciousness and mind. So these three really are key to the way that we work with this, the whole experience, the immediate experience of who we are in terms of our physical embodiment, and also, as we shall see here, our societal situation, the societal landscape, the environment. So Trungpa then says, nadi is like a channel. Energy has to have a channel, a way to journey, its own specialized path. Nadi is like a railroad track in that it provides a certain path or pattern that our energy follows. In this case, the phenomenal world has already created a sense of pattern for us. At this point, the phenomenal world is not regarded as particularly radical or extraordinary. Rather, the phenomenal world has set up the system for us. So we personally do not have to set it up. The system is already there. We can build railroad cars with wheels, but the railroad tracks already exist. Taranatha, one of the Kala Chakra tantric masters, likened the existence of nadi to putting boiled milk out in the cold air. The milk is sure to form its own skin. Boiling hot milk has learned how to deal with reality by forming a skin. That is the railroad track that exists already. We don't have to try to find a transcendental world, a better world, or a world suited to Tantra at all. The world exists as we experience it already, which is the notion of nadi. So I have to say, this had me thinking the boiling milk image and how that could be understood. And this is where I have to, I have a few thoughts about that. But I would like to say that is something that I'm still sort of juggling in my head. And it's one of these, this is a wonderful example of how we could actually deal with being puzzled, because the Vajrayana mentions this and he knows the audience. And it actually leaves, well, it certainly leaves me wondering exactly what that means in terms of my experience and how I understand the Vajrayana and so forth. So that's where this kind of thing is great, because it actually prompts us to turn over and over again, what exactly is meant there? Could it mean that just the nature of consciousness, the way it solidifies and it manifests externally, spontaneously? Possibly. But you know, the absence of immediate certainty around that actually prompts a very healthy curiosity to actually work towards a clear understanding what possibly could be meant here. So I shall, like I said, restrain myself from volunteering my sort of guesswork around this, my speculations, and just leave it at that. But this is an example of how actually this is so great when we hear teachings and we don't understand it. We should actually just let it sit. I mean, you could ask me, hey, what does this mean? And if you catch me in a weak moment, I might start blabbering about what I think it could mean. But also, so much of this we have to do on our own. And there's a lot of value in that. And sometimes all of a sudden things dawn with exceptional clarity and certainty. So, so anyway, there we have it. We have an already existing network of channels in terms of our phenomenal world out there. So that's Nadi. And also those who practice, well, many people come across Nadi, Prana, and Bindu if they're doing yoga in the Tibetan Vajrayana context. And also, of course, you have these references within Indian yoga as well. The view is slightly different. There could be some overlaps, but as we understand it, then in the context of Tibetan Buddhism, so what some of you might be practicing is the Longchen Nyingtik Ngondro. And in the Longchen Nyingtik Ngondro, we actually say we take refuge in Nadi, Prana, and Bindu. And that means that we're taking refuge in the unfailing truth that lies within the pure qualities of these channels, the energy and the consciousness, the innate purity of it. And that is what we engage with in the Vajrayana context in order to skillfully engage or integrate the whole experience of our physicality, you could say, the level of energy. So, Nadi. Trungpa then says, the metaphor for prana is a horse looking for a rider. Such a horse has to be a good horse, well-fed and strong. We're not using the horse as a metaphor for speed, but we're talking in terms of conviction, strength. Again, we're willing to relate with the existing world that has been set up for us. There is a highway already built for us, a supermarket built for us, shopping centers already built for us. There is already some kind of energy and pattern. So prana is the horse that rides on that energy, that rides on the existing tracks of the world, the nadi that have already been set up. So there we are in our world, and we're moving along, and we do this in terms of the external world, in terms of the existing channels of movement in our society. And of course, this also refers then to the way that we relate to our own energy in terms of our bodily situation, and also the way that we relate to this environmental situation of the outer environment, the supermarkets and the shops and so on. Then there is Bindu, the rider of the horse of prana. Bindu is a particular type of consciousness, the inquisitive quality of mind that tries to explore or set up the universe is called Sem in Tibetan. The definition of Sem at this point is that which responds to reference point. Such a mind is willing to survey, willing to look into areas of energy. But Sem purely responds to reference points, while Bindu is the quality of mind that relates with the sense of journey. When we ride a horse, the horse just walks for us. We can't quite say the horse takes the journey. It just moves. The rider takes the journey, in that the rider controls the horse. It is the rider who looks left and right, ahead and behind, and appreciates the sights. This rider is Bindu, which we could simply call consciousness. Okay, here again, I'm going to restrain myself a little bit from going into the classifications here mentioned in terms of mind, or Sem, and then Bindu, or Tigle in Tibetan. And now again, as far as this goes, this is where you would want to have particular instructions and so on. This juxtaposition between Sem and Bindu, I'm not familiar with. But we sometimes, so I'll pass on that. But again, please refer to other works by the Vijayadhara, and particularly there will be students of the Vijayadhara who possibly have received instructions on these aspects of, you could say, the Vajra science of the Kala Chakra and Vajrayana in general. I will, however, say that in terms of how we classically would explain the Nadi, Prana, and Bindu, we would say that Nadi is like the pathways, that the Prana is like a horse, and then as far as the Bindu would go, as it would say, as long as we're confused beings, and that would obviously have a lot to do with what we're talking about here called Sen, which is the dualistic mind that's continually relating in terms of what's out there. Then we would say that the rider actually is not in control. And as long as we haven't actually properly mastered the yogas, and that is what the yogas are for, to gain mastery of Nadi, Prana, and Bindu, then we are somewhat out of control. It's on the basis then of mastering Nadi, Prana, and Bindu that we do gain control of the horse. And that's where we also gain the power of the prana and also the mind and Bindu. So briefly, these three aspects are then, you could say, the existing network, the tracks, then that which travels on the tracks, the railway cars or the horse that travels on the pathways, and then the ones that are being the ones who are actually undertaking the journey, the passengers on the train or the rider of the horse. But these three aspects then are really key in working with the energy, and these also in terms of what we call the four empowerments, and we've already looked at the first empowerment under Abhisheka, I think. Then this has more to do with the second and possibly also the third empowerment, working with the energy and working with the Bindu. So consciousness of, so Trungpa continues, so consciousness of Bindu is journeying through the energies of the world. Consciousness is the awake quality that doesn't have to refer to immediate reference points alone, but has greater scopes, like a radar system. So here we are saying consciousness and Bindu are synonymous. Such a radar system has to be mounted in some kind of mechanical framework, which in this case is functional mind, Sen. And that mounting has to be connected to the track by a wheel, which is prana. In other words, we have a radar system on a mounting that has a wheel that goes along a railway track. The radar system is called Bindu. Its mounting is Sem. The wheel is prana and the rail is Nadi. In this case, it is Bindu, the radar system, that guides and controls the journey. And the whole process is based on energy, obviously. So in terms of our experience of energy, we would say it's very much the mind that is aware of the, you could say, the phenomenal world, but it's Bindu that actually perceives and is the one that's actually at the forefront in terms of the actual perceptions. We would say any perception that we have, actually, we would say Bindu goes to it. And of course, this is then within a framework of a dualistic mind that's engaging the phenomenal world. So again, this is all, you could say, just creating a picture that is basic to this skillful means of working with our energy, which we then do in terms of course, the foundations of the Vajrayana, the Abhisheka that enables us to practice the sadhana that views the world free from our ordinary obscurations, and that is, you could say, the foundations. And without that, then engaging in yoga doesn't make much sense, because the whole harnessing the power and the immediacy of the energy of who we are will inevitably be tied up with ordinary, unimaginative, and essentially destructive ego, unless we actually have the foundations in place in terms of the sadhana and the outlook that we cultivate in the first empowerment. Then once that is in place, then it makes a lot of sense to engage the practice of yoga, of the second empowerment. So, see if there's any questions. Someone is saying, oh, I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you so much for your strong recommendation of the precious video. It's truly a blessing to see the live teaching. Fantastic, beyond words. Three Anjali emoticons. Yeah, the live audience has a question.
The problem is the railway train.
No, Nadi is the railway train.
The carriage, and then consciousness is the driver. Where's the map?
The map. So the question is, if we have these three, the tracks, the carriage, and the driver, where's the map? The map is very much sadhana practice. So we establish an understanding of what we're doing and where we're going on the basis of sadhana practice. So the map is the sadhana. So that's why before we engage in this, we do the sadhana practice. And before we do sadhana practice, we do nundro. So already at the level of sadhana, we've gone beyond the ordinary obscurations in terms of understanding the world. So this is where the nundro is indispensable. And then on the basis of, you can see the vision that we then engage with sadhana practice, we then work with the energy at the level of the second empowerment, the yoga, nadi, prana, and bindu. But it's important for us to hear about this already now, because it gives us a sense that the energy that we're experiencing actually is something that we should be sensitive to. And we're very much engaging with that already at this point. So even though we might not be accomplished in terms of sadhana and all of that, or nundro and so on, already now relating with our energy is quite important, just in terms of actually on the bodhisattva level, where even now on the level of lojong, we begin to actually relate what's happening with me. You know, what's happening with my energy? How do I feel? There's an awareness of what's going on. So the map is, in the tantric context, we would say comes from the already existing training, but in the general Mahayana, it's very much coming from us applying the teachings that we have in Lojong. The teachings on understanding the mind, working with bodhicitta, understanding how to cultivate kindness and compassion, and so on. So that's where working with the energy applies already at this point. Then someone says, I so appreciate this link Trungpa Rinpoche mentions between speech and body and mind. I have been experiencing that with Vajrasattva practice. Yes, Vajrasattva practice is where we're already beginning to engage with the Vajrayana. Then someone asking is about the audio. I think that's up and running. Then someone says, with regards to Vajrasattva, I've been focusing 7 times on body, 7 on speech, and 7 times of mind for 21 times. Okay, all right. Do we have to finish our nundro practice to enter the yoga path and receiving the first empowerment? Well, as we're describing the Anuttara Yoga Tantra here, it certainly requires some foundation. So it's sometimes explained in a very linear fashion. It's not always that it happens in that linear fashion, but this is certainly how you could say, we ordinarily, on a very sort of pragmatic, down to earth, how does it generally work for most people? That's how it's taught. So prostrations, that's already quite yogic. The prostrations are already working with the nadi, and yes, also arguably prana and bindu. What are the chances of mistaking bindu as self? Well, that's it really. We could very much take bindu as absolute and then make that an absolute reference point, and that's why it's so important that we have the foundation of the understanding of emptiness, the understanding of the middle way, the madhyamika, of prajna, paramita, and so forth. And also, really in terms of the experiential aspect, everything that's covered through the processing, the individual processing that takes place through the components of nundro practice, the tantric preliminaries. What is the difference between a siddha and an academic or a scholar? Oh, a siddha is someone who has eaten the meal and is healthy and radiant from having eaten a good meal, whereas an academic is somebody who's sitting working on the menu. And we're not saying that the academics don't work, but strictly speaking, the academics write the menu, they do the research on the ingredients, they write the recipes, and they can make comparisons between different schools and cuisines and so on. And they have a lot to say about nutrition, undoubtedly. But the siddha, that's somebody who ate the meal and is thoroughly pleased. It hit the spot, I guess we could say. Okay. So Ngundo should not be regarded as sadhana. Yeah, I've heard people refer to Ngundo as sadhana. I think that's a little bit sort of, this happens. If somebody mistakenly refers to Ngundo as sadhana, then somebody else starts doing it, and all of a sudden it's been around for a while. But sadhana, strictly speaking, is the Vajrayana methodology that we associate with the first empowerment, even though we can all say the whole Vajrayana is sadhana. But then again, it's not a big mistake if you refer to Ngundo as sadhana. Are there different levels of sadhana? For example, Triratna Anusmriti sadhana is more basic and suitable for all. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we refer to practices in general. You know, when there's liturgies, we sometimes would refer to that as sadhana, and it's completely fine. We have the liturgy of the Buddha in the Treasury of Blessings, which is also a Buddha. It's a Buddha Anusmriti practice, and we also refer to that as the Buddha sadhana. But sadhana, in sort of in the context that we're speaking here, is very much us engaging with the innate purity as it plays out in terms of our reality and our perceptions. Is pointing out instructions and pith instructions the same thing? Not really, although they could. But pith instructions is some instructions on how to actually do it. So, for example, we could study the entire combustion engine, but then again, our mechanic might just say, hey, just stick a key in the ignition and turn it. And we go, wow, that works. So that's pith instruction. Pointing out instruction is even more immediate than that. And it points to that which is beyond words, beyond language. So pointing out instruction is traditionally where we would say this is where the teacher, on the basis of the openness and the deep humility and respect and joy on the part of the student, and also the compassion of the teacher, and the mutual meeting of minds in which then that which is beyond ordinary words and language can be introduced. So we talk about introducing the nature of mind or pointing out and so on. Okay. It's a little bit more time. If you have some questions. Live audience, any questions? Anybody in the virtual audience? Thank you. I hope this is helpful. And of course, this is again, my wish with this is to generate faith. There's so much extraordinary teaching in the writings of great sages like Chögyam Rinpoche. And when we look at that, it actually turns the mind to the Dharma. So it's not just that we're accumulating theory, but we're being inspired and seeing the sense of this, then we feel compelled to put it into practice. Thanks a lot for the recommendation on pith instructions by Kyabje Dilwu and Rinpoche. Oh yes, there's a work called Pith Instructions, yes. Nadi, Prana, and Bindu are sealed as the 3 Vajras. Well, that's seeing our our components are really body, being nadi, speech, being prana, and bindu, mind, are seen in terms of the natural expressions of our awakened condition. So that's where we're engaging the complete aspect of our physicality, our energy, and our mind. And that is seen in terms of its innate pure condition. So we talk about the innate three Vajras as really being basic to Buddha nature. Okay, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Being an ordinary insecure person, then of course I'm very, how do you say, flattery works. So if you're telling me that this is great, thank you very much. Makes it how do you say, makes me a bit more, makes me a bit less shaky in terms of presenting the material. How about the difference between pandita and scholar? Oh, that's more or less the same. In sort of Buddhist vernacular, a pandita, it's of course a superlative scholar. So pandita is scholars as good as they get. But we sometimes just would say, oh yeah, panditas and yogis, like, well, panditas or kusulas or whatever, you know. We would say panditas are those who have the knowledge, which of course is very important, and they're very much in a position of being able to educate others. They're communicators. There's a lot of, and there's Mahasiddhas who were, by the way, panditas. You know, Naropa, for example, Shantideva, even though Shantideva was sort of a, how do you say, a closet pandita, then generally pandita is understood as a scholar of some great capacity. If someone misses a lesson on this course, can they find recordings? Yes. And so many of you would have received a mail that goes out. I always send to people when they want to join, in which there's two links. One is the link that got you in here, and the other is a link to the recordings. Now, if you happen to have lost that email, then just shoot me a mail, jakob@si.org.au, and I'll send the link. I'll send the link to you. Who is there to judge whether we are ready for Anuttara Yoga or not? The teacher? Yeah. That's question one. And then, can it happen that practitioners engage in this level of practice and practice self-deceivement? That's question two. And the answer is yes, that could very well happen. If so, is that what Trungpa Rinpoche cautioned about becoming a little piece of charcoal? Possibly, yes. I can't exactly remember the image, but yes, that sounds very likely. We could scorch ourselves, I guess. Yes. Thank you very much. Very kind words. So, all right. Yeah, this is very much, you know, Vajrayana is very much premised, and the prominence of the teacher is because Vajrayana is really, it comes about through something, and it's about that which is intangible. And of course we could set up sorry, we could set up, and we do, the graded path, the gradual path, where presumably it will all fall into place. But we nevertheless do need a living presence within our life, a teacher. And that is where we do have somebody who empowers us, tells us we're ready, and so forth. Of course, the question always comes up, yeah, but you know, the teacher is so busy, etc., etc. But nevertheless, there is somebody living there. It's not just a sort of a book. You know, it's not like we sit down and we listen to some CD with somebody talking, or watch a video with somebody talking. And as much as that person might sound sort of interesting, so we don't really have a connection. With the guru, you do have a connection. That guru is there with you as the person that you've chosen as your guide. You have picture of the Guru on your shrine, you think of the Guru, you think in situations, you think, what would the Guru do in this situation? There's very much an engagement. Occasionally there will be an opportunity to meet with the Guru. And so that's where we do in the Vajrayana really emphasize how the apprenticeship, and particularly then the situation of devotion and blessing, that really becomes the doorway for engaging in Anuttara Yoga Tantra. Yeah. A very practical chapter, thank you. I practice Rinsen, Longsen, Nyingpo Poa, and I'm familiar with Nadi Prana and Bindu in this context. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. That's a wonderful cycle of teachings. There's so many extraordinary Vajrayana teachings, and they're still with us. Okay, thank you very much for today. I'll dedicate. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the seven good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy Gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.